Good afternoon. Welcome to the program. This is Chuck Morse, Left Right Radio with Chuck Morse. My guest is Nathaniel Jordan. He calls himself the Minister of Wellness. The website is theministerofwellness.com. Motivational health and wellness speaker, certified health coach, strength trainer. Nathaniel, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Chuck. It's an honor to be here.
Nathaniel, talk a bit about your background, how it is that you arrived at wellness training, and what brought you here.
Yeah, so as most Americans, I grew up on the standard American diet. And as most of us, I started witnessing a tremendous amount of suffering and death within my family. My father, who was very inspirational in my life, very strong father, old-fashioned type of dad, worked hard to provide for his family. And by the time he was in his 50s, he started having strokes and ended up dying at the age of 66 after 9 strokes. Now, during his downfall, I went into the Marines right out of high school. I was on I did a couple of deployments. I was on the All-Marine boxing team. I got right out of the Marines and went into the St. Louis Police Department. And it was there that I continued eating the diet I grew up on. I grew up to 260 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so when I got that big, my blood pressure started getting high already. And I'm not even close to being middle-aged. Yeah. But again, my family history is very poor. So it started me on the quest to find, because I started losing all my uncles too, to strokes and heart attack. Mm-hmm. And it started me on a quest to find out, where are these diseases coming from? Are they simply genetic, or is there something we're not being told? So I came across a book called Eat to Live by a medical doctor named Joel Fuhrman. I read his information. It brought everything home for me. I ended up losing 100 pounds. I reversed cardiovascular disease, and I decided that there needed to be another voice in the movement, and I've been blessed to have a very strong voice. So I left the police department and started a full-time nonprofit Ministry of Wellness, Inc., and I go around and I speak to people on different health topics, whether it's reversing heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer. I just have a desire to give people the information that has propelled me. And the best part about what I've done is that, Chuck, I've never gained the weight back. So I'm in year 7, having maintained my weight loss. Most Americans yo-yo diet, lose weight and gain it all back and more. And I've stayed this lean I've never gone above 8% body fat since 2012.
Yeah, very, very inspiring. Now, one of the things that I do besides this program and besides writing, and I'm an author and I write insurance policies, is I do ride share. I drive Uber, which is great fun, by the way. And it brings me to all parts of the city of Boston. I've spent a lot of time in the Black community, and I've noticed that the accessibility to food is different, and it's not as healthy. You know, there's not as much green vegetables, and there's a lot more cans, and there's a lot more kind of processed foods, and I don't think that it's necessarily a conspiracy, but it's very harmful. And, I've seen more obesity there and health problems, as you mentioned. Not that I should talk. I have those issues myself. But as is obvious to anyone looking at the show. But the point is that, the thing that caught my interest here was your title, Genocide by Food. These foods are, you get into bad habits, and you kind of fall into this, and I'm speaking for myself here. I mean, we all have issues. And it's damaging not only physically to people, as you say, with high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, but it's also mentally and emotionally damaging. And one of the things that I found fascinating that you mentioned on with Joe Madison, who I listen to a lot, is that you correlate this diet to issues of violence and crime, particularly amongst young black men. Talk a bit about that.
Yes. So the genocide is absolutely affecting all Americans. This genocidal effort because the goal is to get everybody taking these medications. And over 90% of all Americans your age or over suffer with some type of obesity or ailment. However, we have to take an honest look at the fact, as you mentioned, that the African American community is suffering from this genocide that we're all under, but the African American community is suffering from that genocide much worse than other ethnic groups. And so the diet style that we're eating, a diet that is high in refined sugar, high in saturated fat, it impedes nutrients getting into the brain that controls behavior. So what I'm saying is that it's been known for years and years that our brain is like a computer, and you can turn on and off certain components of the brain and control behavior. And the epidemic, the horrific epidemic of violence that we see in the African community, and then even in some rural communities, we see this epidemic because of the lack of access to the healthy foods that the brain needs to function properly. So we are what we eat, and we are dangerously detached from the fact that every component of our body is dependent upon the thousands of natural medicines that we're supposed to be getting. But we've lost a taste for real food.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting caught up in the, to use Eisenhower's term, the military-industrial complex. I call it the medical-industrial complex. You've got the drug companies offering us these drugs, which, by the way, you take a look at the fine print on these things, it's horrible.
Sure.
The side effects, these are highly concentrated substances. Now, I'm not against drugs if you need them in a certain situation, but they ought to be a last resort. It should be really the handling of a symptom, not the problem as well in many, many cases. And in a sense, the refined nature of the drug is given to people as a response to the refined nature of the food. The food is so refined and so purified that, like sugared foods, and these foods that are loaded with sugars and chemicals, this stuff is highly refined and it's very pure, and it goes right into the blood system. It goes right to the brain. You don't process it normally like you would with any food, because it doesn't need to be digested. It goes right into your system. And that's, it makes you fat and it makes you crazy. And they give this stuff to young kids, who are on their way to school, and they're giving them a donut or something. It's besides the fact that there's no nutritional value, you're talking about refined sugar, refined flour, bleached flour, and heavily processed foods, which involves all sorts of chemicals that are in large portions, they are deadly.
Right. Yeah. Drugs. They're drugs. The most abused drug in America is food. These foods are stripped of all of their nutrients. And when you consume a food that's stripped of all its nutrients, you might as well be snorting heroin or crack cocaine. It sends a dopamine rush to the brain. It destroys brain nutrients like GABA that controls your ability to not have mood swings and temper tantrums. You can go down to taurine that controls your ability to control aggressiveness and to pay attention. You have glutamine that affects aggressive behavior. It's a diet that's not even a diet because it's not even real food. And then we have the food industry that has built a system that is so complex that if you want to weave yourself out of this genocide by diet, it can be very difficult, and many people give up the fight because there's so many forces at work. Because what's more American than eating a hot dog and some apple pie? So So it's American to eat foods that will clog your arteries, give you heart attack and stroke, and make you fat. That's American, and that's what people have to fight. So that and it's so bad, and that's called social normalcy. That's one of the 12 components of food addiction that I've identified to why people, because you actually have a lot of knowledge, it seems, about these things, but as you admitted, you still, struggle to eat the foods that will bring your weight down to match the knowledge you have. Well, that's because it's so many forces that you have to fight to get lean and healthy. And I've identified 12 components that keeps people on what I call the death train of being highly intelligent and successful. But when it comes to the most critical thing in their lives, they act out in a manner that's very illogical compared to the other areas in their life that they have mastered.
Okay, my guest is Nathaniel Jordan, the Minister of Wellness, and his book, which is available on his website, The Minister of Wellness, is the Genocide by Food. Nathaniel, I think the key word there that you mentioned is addiction. And addiction, it's like anything else, whether it be a drug addiction or whether it be a food addiction. The reason it's addictive is because it is so refined. I mean, that's why crack is addictive. It's a natural substance that's been refined so severely that it goes right into the body, and it creates a feeling and a sensation that you want to replicate. And the same thing is true with food. If you get a hamburger from McDonald's, for example, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with occasionally going to McDonald's. I mean, I like McDonald's. I'm not going to deny that. But the point is that they spray the bun with sugar and some kind of substance, and they work all sorts of highly refined things in that thing to make it taste better. And it's addictive because it does something to your body. It goes right into your system, and it creates a craving for more because you have an experience with it, and you want to replicate that experience because it's easy, because it goes into your system.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very difficult thing to, you get on this kind of like, you're like a hamster on a wheel. I mean, you get onto it, and it's very hard to get off it.
Yeah, for most people, I wouldn't recommend anybody eating at restaurants like McDonald's that serves foods with about 10,000 different FDA approved chemicals. Most of them that they don't list on the grid. That's just too dangerous. And we can't play with fire. Most Americans are overweight, obese. So the attempt to have a moderation diet doesn't work, because if it worked, then we wouldn't have the epidemic of obesity. And then 20% of all Americans have been diagnosed as having some form of mental illness by a psychiatrist. So we are looking at a very sickly and mentally ill population as a whole, and it's getting worse. And so the moderation diet just has to go. You can't moderate drugs, because if you go and you eat the fast food or any other foods in the grocery stores, you're not going to stop. You're going to keep going back, and and those calories are going to replace calories for other foods that you should be eating. And then you'll lose a taste for it, because those foods have been scientifically engineered to excite the taste buds in an unnatural manner. So there's no way that you can sit down and eat what used to be one of my favorite meals. So don't feel too bad, Chuck. I used to love triple whoppers.
Well,
I used to eat them every day, but you're not going to eat a triple whopper and a Coke and some fries, and then a few hours later have a taste for a salad. It's just not going to happen. Because,
I know.
Yeah.
They spray the fries apparently with some kind of a meat product. I mean, it's if you even knew the beginning of it, it's awful. And it goes right to, I mean, I don't want to use the word conspiracy here, but in a way, it's kind of an informal collusion between the drugs and the government and the food industry to create easy to digest fast food that keeps people hooked on it, and it makes people docile and stupid. You could take a look at the old Soviet Union. They used to have everybody there would drink this heavily sugared drink. I don't even know what they called it, but it would keep people dumb. I mean, it would make you, it would sap your energy, and it would sap your creativity and your imagination and your ability to think cognitively. And that's what, I mean, in the case of the Soviets, that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted a docile population that would become, not speak up too much, and that it would become like human resources. They could then channel them into these big combines of industry, and it would serve the purpose of the state. I'm not saying that that's happening in the United States. I'm not claiming that it's a conspiracy, but whether it is or not is almost irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that this is what's happening. You have people who are, the food and the exposure to these substances is causing them to not perform at their best. They're not going to be the true sovereign citizen that they ought to be. And that it is particularly targeting the Black community. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, it keeps people down. I mean, it's keeping people in a condition where they're not stepping out and achieving more. And it's, it should be exposed, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a responsibility, and it's called epigenetics. That's what we're talking about, where you can change people's genetics with food. You can play with people's brains and turn people mentally ill, depressed, sociopathic, and you can create all the other circumstances. So they already know that sugar has been known for years that sugar affects mood. Even in a regular person that doesn't go out and commit violent crime, many of your listeners can identify with mood swings and temper tantrums and bouts of depression and anxiety. That all has to do with how you're feeding your brain. So the epidemic of crime and violence and anger that we see in the African American community, a bedrock of that is the destruction of the brain. The least access to healthy foods and more readily available to foods that to foods that would heal the brain. And it's hard not to believe that it's intentional because, again, the Nazis the Nazis knew about epigenetics to the point where they had a very advanced nutritional program. And as a matter of fact, Hitler, now I don't know if he was successful. There's debates about this, but he definitely attempted to be a vegan because even back then he had knowledge that food is very important to how you control the thinking and the physical health of a population. And so epigenetics was always important. And what I'm saying is that the knowledge that they knew now, it's still known now. It's just not being known to the masses.
No, I mean, I've always heard that Hitler and the upper echelons of the Nazis were all vegetarians, and that they must have had they were super conscious of these things. Yeah. And that, yeah, I mean, it's, it's not just the drug companies, and it's not just, the big fast food industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's peddling stuff that they can produce cheaply and quickly and get people into the door. But it's also the whole social service industry, and you talk about mental illness or emotional problems. I mean, the psychiatric industry, the social workers, these armies of people this whole cottage industry that's built up around problems that, they're giving, that they've created. I'm not saying deliberately, but, it's sort of like creating the poison and the antidote in the same laboratory. The poison is these poisonous substances they put in food that if you gave a large dose of it to a rat, it would kill the rat. And then when people become ill, physically and emotionally, then they come in with their armies of social workers and social service people who are, looking for an industry and they're looking for employment, and they then continue it on and on and on and on. When you're getting to the root cause of the problem and the one that would actually empower the person to take control of their own life and their own destiny by taking control of their health. Now, Nathaniel, I would like you to, if you don't mind, lay out some of the particulars with regard to the the research you've done, and the kind of diet that you recommend, the kind of diet that has helped you?
Yeah, so the diet that I recommend is a nutrient-dense, plant-rich diet. Simply put, if nature did not grow it from earth, or it doesn't grow in a tree, it's not food, and it should be consumed in minimal or zero amounts. In my opinion, if you want to get out of the cycle of food addiction, you should absolutely not eat any foods with ingredients with 20 letters attached to them. That's just akin to drinking bleach. So the fundamental principle of eating to live is that we want to eat large amounts of salads, because that's our medicine. Food is our medicine. That's what Hippocrates said. He said that thousands of years ago. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. It used to be like that in America before they decided, the Carnegie family and the other families decided to sabotage naturopathic doctors and replace it with allopathic medicine. And right. The Truth About Cancer by Tom Bollinger goes into that in great detail. But so we want to go back to eating a diet that we used to eat before the event of fast food. And that's foods that grow from earth. It's a vegetable-based diet. The G-bombs, that's an acronym Dr. Furman created. Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. Each of those foods have been scientifically proven to help us win the war on cancer. As you stated, we're barbecuing diseased animals on the grill, and then when we get cancer, we think a pill is coming. They have truly made us insane, where we just don't think logically when it comes to our health. If you eat burgers and pizzas and steaks, and then when your heart clogs up and you get a heart attack, then you blame genetics. That's nonsense. No, it's the diet that's doing it. So we want to reverse the diet. And we have populations in the world that have not been touched by Western culture, and we consider those cultures primitive. They don't have any heart disease. They don't have cancer until they eat the standard American diet. So it's a plant-rich diet. It's a plant-rich diet full of green vegetables and beans and fresh fruits. But it's easy for me to say that, Chuck, but the 12 components of food addiction that people have to weave through just to get to that point. And that's why I do the speaking, I do the seminars and the lectures, so that people can have the knowledge to help empower them to start eating a whole foods, plant-rich diet.
I think you make the point in that, for example, my understanding is that in I think it's in either China or Japan, when they started introducing the American fast food, suddenly people started to get fat, which they weren't before. And suddenly you had the introduction of things like high blood pressure and other ailments that really weren't there before as well. So, you could take a look at it scientifically. You could take a look at populations around the world and their diets. And I think that would prove out exactly what you're saying. Now, Nathaniel, I want to ask you, I hope this isn't personal. It's not meant to be. It's more of an educational question but could you talk a little bit about what you actually eat in the course of a day? You look healthy. You've lost 100 pounds, but you're a big guy. You obviously have an appetite. How do you do it? I mean, what do you eat in the course of a day?
So when you eat to live for as long as I have, your cells become so cleansed that it changes your perception of hunger. One of the components of food addiction that keeps Americans hooked on these foods that are creating this genocide by diet is toxic hunger, meaning that most Americans are too uncomfortable not to eat. When you eat the burgers and the pizzas and all of our American pastime foods, it builds a tremendous amount of poisons in your cells. Now, this is very important to understand. The body can only heal when food is done digestion. Your body can only heal when you're fasting. That's why the crackhead has to shoot up every 4 hours, because after 4 hours, his body will attempt to expel the crack and he'll start feeling withdrawal, shaking and headache, and can get violent sometimes. That's the same thing with most Americans. They go 4 hours without eating, their stomach growls, they get a headache, they get fatigued, they get lightheadedness. What I'm saying is that that's not hunger. That is toxic hunger occurring because the body is trying to expel the poisons you've eaten. So when you start to truly eat to live, Chuck, the perception of hunger changes from a stomach and head sensation to a throat sensation. And the longer you go eating to live, and the cleaner your cells are, you can go long periods of time without eating because you feel nothing in between meals. Matter of fact, you'll get to a point like me, because I've been doing this for so long, you prefer not to eat unless you have to, because just the act of having to digest and go to the bathroom, it becomes a nuisance. So I only eat 1 meal a day now. That's the point that I'm getting to. I used to eat 7 meals a day, because every 3 hours I would feel what, many of your viewers are feeling. You get the stomach growling and the headache. I started eating to live. I went to 4 meals a day, then 3, then 2, then I'm at 1. So today I just got done eating a couple hours ago, and I have a 3-pound salad. So I load it with kale and mangoes and apples and grapes, and red onion, and I put plenty of nuts and seeds in it because I'm a power lifter. And then I make my own salad dressing from whole plant foods, pineapple, oranges, almonds, balsamic vinegar. I'll blend that up, and then I'll have a whole bunch of fruit. I ate like 6 or 7 tangerines. I love citrus fruit. And when you get off the sugar, man, fresh fruit tastes like candy. That becomes your candy, and that should be our candy, is fresh fruit. So that's it. That's my meal for the day. I eat, one very large meal, and I'll be good until tomorrow.
Now, what about meat? Are you a vegetarian or?
Yes, I am a vegan because I just, first of all, my family history with heart disease and stroke. I truly believe that, I believe my family lineage comes from West Africa. And the tribe that my family descended from were vegetarians. So, most of the traditional African diet was vegetarian. So, I have when you're talking about fighting genetics, most of the men in my family, strokes and heart attacks come. So the cholesterol and the saturated fat in the meat, I just don't, I want to avoid that completely. So I feel safest by avoiding all the cholesterol and the fact that animal has no fiber. And I just can't find any benefits to eating it at all. I just can't. People will say the only thing they'll tell me is protein, but it's an archaic myth to believe that you have to eat flesh to get protein, because protein originates in plants.
Right. I mean, there's protein, a lot of protein in nuts. I also would suggest that if people are going to have meat, it's not a bad idea to have kosher meat. Now, I happen to be Jewish, so I have kosher meat, but it's actually healthier. I've read articles about this. I mean, there's a reason biblically why the animal is killed in a certain way. It's much more humane. There's less, there's less of an adrenaline problem. The animal is healthy. It has to be in good shape. It's very careful and very exacting in the inspection. And I've been told that when people eat kosher meat and then they eat non-kosher meat, they feel sick from the non-kosher meat, and that the kosher meat is better. Not that you should eat meat at all, but if you're going to, it's a better choice. It's a healthier choice, in general.
The meat industry, the way they're treating these animals.
Oh my God, yeah. I did a show on that. It makes you sick to hear about what they do to, animals and chickens, and it's just, and even fish, the fish in these ponds, these man-made ponds. I don't even want to talk about it. It's nauseating. It's not good. And it kind of goes to what you're talking about, Nathaniel, this genocide. I mean, it's a stark word, but there's truth to it. This is a dumbing down of the whole country. with these foods. It affects everybody. I mean, at all strata of income too, by the way. You know, you see very rich people, they're just at McDonald's like everyone else. You know, it's an epidemic. I mean, it's all over. So, you know, I applaud what you're doing. I mean, you're bringing up public awareness about this problem. And I think that if enough people become aware of the poisonous nature of some of these additives, and most of them, and this principle that if it doesn't grow in the ground, don't eat it, then we will have change in places like McDonald's. I mean, they'll respond to social pressure. You know, they used to wrap the burgers in these styrofoam boxes until environmentalists started complaining about it because it was, you know, the stuff, it doesn't degrade in the earth. It sits there for thousands of years. So they stopped it. And I think that the same pressures could be brought today if we have enough people who are aware and are conscious of what we're talking about here. And so, you know, I applaud your work in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, knowledge is power. Knowledge is very important.
Talk, you know, because we're reaching the end of the program, Nathaniel, let my listeners know where they can reach you, how they can get more information about you, where they can get your book, where they can get, you know, check out your website.
Yeah, so everything is on theministerofwellness.com. Now, there's nobody else on the earth that uses that title. So if you go to Google and you search for the Minister of Wellness, I'm going to pop up. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. My books are on my website, theministerofwellness.com. So pretty much if you keep that term in mind, and whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or wherever, the Minister of Wellness, I will pop up.
Well, listen, I mean, I feel better just talking to you. I mean, this is a great learning, you know, it's a great learning experience for me and hopefully for the listeners. And Nathaniel, I want to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me again, Joe.
All right, take care. And I shall return tomorrow at the usual time. Have a good day, everybody.